President Cyril Ramaphosa says that the Energy Department will take over responsibility for overseeing the state utility Eskom. This change is in line with a resolution that was adopted at the ANC's National Conference last week, and it specified that state companies operating in specific economic sectors should be overseen by the relevant government departments. Now, Eskom has been at the epicenter of a national energy crisis, and the country saw a record 205 days of rolling blackouts last year. And joining us now for more on this is Energy Analyst Lungile Mashele. Lungile, good morning. Thanks so much for being with us here on Morning Live, and a prosperous 2023 to you.
Thank you so much.
So let's first just start, Lungile, with contextualizing this particular problem around Eskom before we even look at this resolution. 205 days of rolling blackouts in 2022. I think, we actually knew that it would probably be a bad year, but did we anticipate that it would be as bad as it got?
So, Sakina, I don't think anybody anticipated the 205 days, certainly upwards of about 150 days. Even if you look at Eskom's estimates, they had told us that in winter already, that worst case, we are looking at about 100 days. And it was far more than that. I mean, we basically load shed every other third day in 2022. And I certainly don't think things are going to get better in 2023 either. We are already on stage 4. People are only going back to work now. Children are only going back to school. Industry is starting to open up, commerce, so by next week, we will be looking at back to where we were just before the shutdown in December, and we were on stage 6 at that point. So by the time that we get to about March, April, looking at even winter, we could be looking at higher stages of load shedding in South Africa.
Now, this is, of course, not what ordinary South Africans want to hear, but this is unfortunately the reality that we face. Speaking about industry closing down and unfortunately not seemingly bringing any sort of reprieve for South Africans, the question then is, Lungile, when are we going to see any sort of improvement, if at all? Because you would have imagined that during that downtime, when industry shuts down, would be the time that Eskom would use to do the maintenance, as they always tell us. But unfortunately, seemingly things are not going according to plan in any way, shape or form.
Definitely not. There have been reports from the likes of the CSIR who basically say that prepare or anticipate for load shedding for the next 10 years, which is dire. It is unnecessary. But if we keep doing things the way that we are, we're going to end up there. With regards to maintenance, so for the last 2.5 years or so, Eskom has basically deferred reliability maintenance, which is that critical maintenance that they need to do to ensure the longevity of their plant. They've deferred it for a number of reasons, because they didn't want to load shed, because they did not have money, because there was no adequate planning. And this was detailed by a report from the COO that was done when they announced the results a couple of weeks ago. And so if they have not done that maintenance over the last 2 years, that reliability maintenance, it does not bode well for the future and what we can basically anticipate. What they have done is statutory maintenance, which is in line with the regulations and what they have to do in order to maintain the generation licenses. Other than that, they have not gone over and above. And we need to be very cognizant also that at Eskom currently, their diesel budget is actually much more than their maintenance budget. That alone tells us that things are not going well there. And if they continue on this path, things are going to get a whole lot worse.
Now, a few things there, Lungile. Firstly, that report that you refer to was released, I think it was the 23rd of December. And, that in itself for me was like, why are we receiving such crucial information 2 days before Christmas when, people are probably not paying attention? But more importantly, if we can maybe just reflect on some of the key takeaways from that report. As you mentioned, some of what the COO told us in that report pertains to that maintenance. Now, again, Eskom at some point last year told us they don't have money for diesel, but money was somehow found and that situation was plugged. But if you look at how much Eskom is spending on diesel, and again, then there was talk about trying to buy directly and not go through a third person, as it were. But that, of course, was also taken off the table. But where does the solution lie, Lungile? Because diesel is being, put to the forefront, and that is proving to be way too costly. But then also we are told about renewable energy sources, and where is that going to come from? Do we have places or people or entities who are actually sitting with surplus energy that could be brought onto the grid that we don't know about?
So, Sakina, these are a myriad of issues that industry players have been raising with government. One of the key things is that in September, when the president, announced that they're going to double bid window 6 to 5,200 megawatts, this was done. This went out into, the bidding process. People came and bid. In December, when it was announced who the preferred bidders are, only 1,000 megawatts of that was actually announced. And the reason for that is because there is no grid capacity in the Cape region. This is Northern Cape, Western Cape, Eastern Cape. Now, all of us will live shocked because Eskom does release a report on an annual basis of the grid capacity that is available. But it seems that the private sector has usurped all of this capacity for themselves, meaning that what is supposed to be left for the public good is basically not available. So that's the first thing. So now already it means that the renewable energy IPP program might have to basically just close or shut down because we have no grid capacity. We were told that we can import electricity from countries such as Zambia, such as Botswana. Botswana made it very clear that they can only sell us excess, and only excess when they do not need it, and it's going to be on the weekend only, in the evenings. Now, that's not really helpful either. Then Zambia, as we well know now, they are on level 3 of load shedding, which basically means 12-hour outages for them. So they've got nothing to sell us. There was what we call a standard offer, going around speaking to various industry players and saying who has excess capacity. And the aim was to get about 1,000 megawatts from this. So far, only 10 megawatts has been signed. So, you look at all of this and it's one failure right after the other. And perhaps this is exactly why there have been requests to move from the DPE to the DMRE to sort of streamline things and make things easier and reduce the red tape for Eskom as well.
So how is that likely to improve the situation? What sort of change will this likely bring about if we look at that resolution adopted at the ANC's National Conference last week, Lungile, which specified that state companies operating in specific economic sectors should actually be overseen by the relevant government departments? How do you see this particular situation working out? Because it's not new. For a while, some people have been arguing that perhaps Eskom should be under the Department of Minerals and Energy. So how do you see this one playing out, and how is it likely to improve the situation?
So, to be very honest, I see this as a political response to a political problem, really. It's not necessarily going to resolve the issues that are at Eskom or at any other SOE. But what it will do is perhaps lay that responsibility at the minister that has been blamed for load shedding incorrectly for the last 2 years. So he's finally going to be looking at Eskom. He is going to, first of all, be dealing with their policy. He will also be their shareholder. He will also be giving us update on their shareholder compact, as well as whether they have achieved their KPIs or not. And for that purpose, for that accountability, that is definitely required, because for the last 2.5 years, there's been a zero accountability on Eskom side, because they can always say, but we spoke to DMRE, but we went to DPE, but NERS is doing this, but government is doing that. So now it streamlines everything on that front. Other than that, it is not the silver bullet we think it is going to be. You might still anticipate or have that political interference. Things might not go according to plan. There might be feelings of overreach even. We do know that Minister Mantashe does speak his mind and does call people and does, I don't want to use the word interfere, but he is a very hands-on minister.
So, Lungile, government, of course, already announced plans to split Eskom into a company that has 3 units and take over part of its debt as well to try and make it financially sustainable. So now that things are likely to see Eskom move to the Minerals and Energy Department, how will the involvement of the Energy Department affect this, if at all?
So there will not be any change whatsoever. Similar to Transnet and, Denel, you'll still have the generation, transmission and distribution business. They will all lie within the DMRE. But, the president did issue a disclaimer that, government processes do take time. So even what we're seeing now or what they've announced, we should only really anticipate in the next 2 years or so. It will not be an immediate thing. But in terms of how, it's going to change the plan, it changes absolutely nothing.
Now, Lungile, the other question, of course, is a lot of talk because we've seen quite a bit of blame for the current Eskom situation being placed at the door of Minister Gwede Mantashe, depending on who you're speaking to and what you're reading. So given that there is this narrative that says that Minister Mantashe is somehow opposed to a green energy, which he, of course, has denied, given that narrative, and even though President Ramaphosa actually advocates, as do government overall, for that transition to green energy, are we likely to see a little more, backlash in terms of this particular move as per the ANC resolution, especially from those in that green energy sector?
So I certainly anticipate backlash coming from that movement or from that lobby group, and which is rather unfortunate. If you look at Minister Mantashe, since 2018, we have not seen gas, we have not seen coal. Yes, we have spoken about nuclear, but more in the lines of the Koeberg existing plant. The RFPs that we've seen for bid window 5, bid window 6, being renewables only. Then we had the risk mitigation IPP, which was a myriad of technologies. But this blame of he's a fossil fuel minister, in reality, the RFPs that have been coming from his department are a far cry from what the industry actually needs. One thing I am hopeful for, though, is that he has been very vocal on the need for a diversified energy mix and on the need for looking at the social and technical and economic benefits of certain technologies. He does advocate for coal. He also advocates for nuclear as well as gas and renewables as well. And this is displayed in the Integrated Resource Plan of 2019.
So, Lungile, all said and done, it doesn't matter, what grand ideas are put on paper. It doesn't matter how we unbundle Eskom or move the entity from one portfolio to the next, or which minister is in charge. I suppose all South Africans want, whether it be lay South Africans or business, is a constant supply of reliable energy. So how do we get to that point? What do we need to do? Because if you look at the new builds, Kusile Medupi, the cost overruns there are absolutely eye-watering and despicable if you think about what they were meant to cost, how long it was meant to take to build them, and where we ultimately find ourselves. But that aside, just for the time being, what do we need to do to stabilize the grid in South Africa?
Sakina, first and foremost, Eskom needs to prioritize reliability maintenance. It is our only way out of this mess. We then need to make sure that in prioritizing that reliability maintenance, we increase our EAF, energy availability factor. We cannot be sitting on an EAF. Just in December, the EAF was the lowest we've ever seen in this country. It was at 50%. This has to increase. This is based on a target of about 74%. This has to change. Yes, it might not get back to 70%, but certainly, even if we improve by 10%, Sakina, that will at least avoid stage 4 load shedding, which we're currently experiencing. Thereafter, we can discuss things like buying from the regional pool, buying from, Mozambique, instance, looking at various other technologies such as power ships, which have been in the pipeline, have been delayed by a number of different reasons, but we're at a situation in the country where we certainly cannot afford any more debate that's not taking us anywhere. Philosophical debate is what I call it. We're sitting with load shedding each and every single day that is disrupting our lives. Let's get whatever we can get on board, let's get it on time, and let's move on with our lives past this situation. We will consider the need to transition once we have energy security.
So, Lungile, with regard to the reliability maintenance, given the situation we have right now, as you say, we are sitting on load shedding every single day to varying degrees. What if the reliability maintenance were to be done as it should be done? How is that likely to exacerbate the load shedding situation?
So it certainly will. But the key thing is that Eskom does have the capacity, despite what they're saying, they do have the capacity to actually execute the maintenance that is required. The key thing is that it's not being done adequately. So throughout December, people were, asking, but the demand is so low, typically this time of the year, why are we still load shedding? And the reality of the matter is Eskom, yes, they had unplanned breakdowns, but they were also running a maintenance program. So you can load shed people and at the end of the day also have a reliability maintenance program running. Yes, you will have higher stages of load shedding, but people will appreciate that after the pain that they've experienced, that at least Eskom's whole fleet is where it should be and will operate in a way that ensures energy security. At the moment, we do not have that that assurance that that's what is going to happen. So you can have reliability maintenance and unplanned breakdowns at exactly the same time to get to a point where you do what needs to be done. Yes, people will be inconvenienced, but at the end of the day, they will reap the benefits. We saw this in 2015, where there was a maintenance festival that was run. And after that 6 months period of load shedding almost each and every single day, we got to a point where we did not have to load shed for 2.5 years after that. Eskom was supposed to continue on this path, and they didn't.
So none of this actually sounds good for the South African public, Lungile. And then there's, of course, the million-dollar question about skills and competence. Do we have the people with the requisite skill sets in South Africa to actually take care of this problem?
So, Sakina, it depends who you speak to. If you speak to Eskom, they will tell you that they do not have the skills. But I want to remind everybody that companies like Sasol are running a similar aged fleet in Secunda. They have an EAF that's above 70%. So we cannot talk about that, oh, well, the fleet is aged and there are various other issues. Ultimately, Eskom has no money. They've got no money to appoint people. They contractors. They're having issues contracting with them also. There are a number of contractors that are in court cases with Eskom. So you cannot tell me that you do not have skills when Secunda is operating perfectly fine. If need be, second the people who are in Secunda to come and run Eskom's fleet, if that's the issue. And if they're not available, look elsewhere. Look in China. Look the US, Germany, anybody who's running a coal fleet. If you're saying the skills do not exist in this country.
And what about the question of sabotage? Because it would seem as though that is another spanner in the works of an already complicated situation. How do you think, this ought to be dealt with? We know that in December, the South African National Defence Force was deployed to 4 of the power stations. We've now heard that the outgoing CEO, Andre de Ruyter, has been poisoned. There's just a lot going on, quite apart from the nuts and bolts at Eskom.
Which is rather unfortunate because Eskom's primary responsibility is the provision of electricity, nothing more and nothing less. All of this stuff that is happening on the periphery is diverting attention from the fact that today is the 10th of January and we've been load shedding for 10 days at stage 4. In terms of sabotage, and I hate using that word, sabotage refers to things to do with political gain, economic gain, and usurping, the rule of power. in this case, it's just plain old vandalism and theft, and people being opportunistic, stealing diesel, stealing coal, or swapping coal out. There's nothing that's happening at Eskom that has not happened at PRASA, that has not happened at Transnet. They're all experiencing exactly the same issues, and that lies under the auspices of the SAPS ultimately. You look at issues where Andre has said that there was a device found in his car. Now there's the whole, poisoning, incident. And look, if the story is true, I'm really sorry that he's going through, all of that. But I'd also be very shocked, finding out that a person can be poisoned and 24 hours later they're giving a press briefing on their resignation in 3 months' time. Sakina, if I'm poisoned, that's my last day at work, and that's just me. But all of this is diverting attention from a very key thing, that South Africans do not have electricity, and we need to share electricity amongst ourselves. This is untenable.
Well, Lungile, we'll have to leave it there for today, but thank you so much helping us unpack that. Energy Analyst Lungile Mashele speaking to us about what the goings-on at Eskom, and also that announcement by President Cyril Ramaphosa that the Energy Department will now take over responsibility for overseeing state utility Eskom.